everyone. It's Mary Lynn from Ecstasy Crafts, and we're here today to do the second part of the tea bag folding class. So I know, unfortunately, we had to change the schedule, so I'm not sure how that worked for everybody. However, we will have the video up immediately after the class, and so everyone can watch it at their leisure. If you're joining us for the first time, we are going to make these two cards that you see here. They're Christmas designs, and they're using the same tea bag folding kit that we used in our last class. So hopefully that will work well for everybody, and we're going to make these two cards. But first, because we had an ambitious class the last time, we didn't have a chance to finish our two designs. So we're going to put those together if you haven't done that already. And then we're going to make the two new Christmas cards. Okay, so hopefully if you joined us for our last class, you have your rosette and your other rosette, the two, and then we're going to finish off these two cards. Okay, so I'm going to switch my screen so that we're just going to have the overhead camera. All right. So I'm just going to put these two aside, and I'm just going to go through what came in the kit, because if somebody purchased it and didn't have a chance to make the cards from the last class, you should have the following. So this is the stamp set, and you get 3 stamps, a large, 2 small, and then several sentiments. Happy birthday because you're special and love you. So very versatile. Then you received the 2 pointy petal dies. And so these are the 2 dies. And then you also have the instructions on the inside. So there are 4 folds that are described in these instructions. And in the last class, we did 2 of them. Then for this class, we're going to modify things a little bit. But just so to point out the instructions. You also received these 2 pages of instructions for the 2 cards that we're going to finish off today. And then you should have received emails for the instructions for today's class. Then you would have received 4 sheets of colored paper. They are coordinating colored papers. I only have 3 here, but there was actually 4 different colors. And they could have been blue or greenish, pink, purple, or these pink shades. And you received 2 of the Pixie Sparkle powders in Peppermint Twist and Gilded Plum. We're not using those today. However, we will use the background that we created for our card in the last class. And these you can use for all sorts of projects in the future. And I definitely will try and incorporate these into future classes. All right, so that's what came in the kit. So now, why don't we finish it off this card first? Oh, you also received a frame and the white cardstock in your kit. I don't have this die set that created this frame. However, I made one from a nested square die set from Sue Wilson. It's slightly smaller, but the die is listed in the instructions. I think it's CED 5557 or something, 5537. And then this is just the squares, the stitch squares, because it has little, you can see little piercings on the front. So grab your background design. This is the one I made with the Pixie Sparkle powders. And what you're going to do is cut a piece. Now this is, I believe, 5.5 by 5.5 inch square. And you're going to need a size of the purple background that almost covers the square. I think I left just a shade, but the frame looks nice if there is some purple behind it. And the one thing I don't have with me this afternoon is my ruler. So figure out which part of your background you want to use. I'm going to try and use an area that has a lot of color. And I'm going to cut it close to 5.5 here. Now, if you're not familiar with using the Pixie Sparkles, because you're just tuning in on a rerun of the video, then check out the first video, and that will show you how we use the Pixie Sparkles. If you want a more solid type background, then you can spread the Pixie Sparkles out using a paintbrush. This one I just spritzed and let it dry on its own. So that's what I'm going to use today. Once you have your piece cut, then, and hopefully you have a card base that is, I believe it's 5.5 by 11. And then you're going to score that in half if you haven't done so already. Just going to grab my scoring tool. So 5.5 here. I had 2 ready, which is good, because we're going to use a 5.5 again for one of the Christmas cards today. Scoring tool that comes with your scoreboard as a bone folder, and just crease your fold. Now I made this 5.5. I think I'm going to trim it slightly because I actually want just a shade off. All right, and then I'm just going to use some double-sided tape to attach this to my card. So whatever size double-sided tape you might have, I like the Be Creative double-sided tape. It has a nice strong adhesive, and it comes in a variety of widths so that you can match whatever works best for your project. Sometimes I use this thinnest, which is 3 millimeters, but for this I'm using 5 millimeter size, and that's because there's often a little bit of a wave to watercolor paper that you've made a pixie powder background on. So it just adheres it better. So I'm just going to peel back the protective layer of the tape. And then attach to my card. And again, put it in the orientation that you want for your card design. Now we can add the frame. So you would have received a frame with the scalloped border, and it's slightly larger than the one I'm using today because I received a kit, but I don't have the die set to recreate it. So now what I'm going to do is use some foam strips to add my frame to my card. So if you have some foam tabs, you could use those strategically placed on your frame. So my foam tabs, I think they're 5mm by 5mm, would fit perfectly in this square as it would in the one that you received. However, what I like to use are strips. We do have a variety of strips on our website. There's Hunky, Dory, and these couture creations. This is a sheet of black foam strips from Couture Creations. They also do come in white, and they're approximately, I would say they're about 2.5mm thick. What I like about them is they're nice and slim, and they fit right in the frame, and you don't have to, sorry, I had to reach across there to get my scissors. Oh, I have them here. They fit right inside the frame so that you don't see them, and very quickly you're able to use them. I can get 2 sides per strip, and with a little left over. There are Hunky Dory strips as well that come in 2 different sizes on a sheet that's about this long. So from here to here, not quite as long as the couture, but they're also handy to have because they come in the 2 different widths. All right. So this has like a tiny piece of acetate adhesive. The white ones have just a paper type release sort of protective layer. The acetate doesn't fold back as easily to do my little technique to get it straight. So I'm just going to estimate here. I like to put my frame down first because then I can center my rosette. So there's the frame, and it is raised. And you can't see the black, which is great. And so now you should have your rosette, and you can place it inside the frame however you desire. So whether you want the point at the top or you want it flat at the top, it doesn't really matter. Whatever looks good to your eye. When we made this rosette, we attached all of the tea bag folding designs to a small square. So what I'm going to do now is add some double-sided tape to this little foam, or not foam, but little paper square. And then I'm going to adhere that to my card. Now in the center of the rosette, you can put whatever you wish. I'm going to do it with flat at the top, only because in this one I did it the pointy way. So you can say both ways. Really doesn't matter. Press it down. And then in this design, I had quite a large pearl that lent itself to the center. And so if you have a large pearl, you can put that on. However, I also thought an alternative would be a small circle that we can create a dome out of, and I'll show you that. So it's hard. I don't know if you can see it. You can see it there, that I've just pressed into it to create a half circle dome. So this I cut from a little die that I have that's part of my nested circles from Nellie. So it's a Nellie's nested circle die set, but whatever small circle you might have. I chose black because I made it for this box rosette and added sparkle to it. So very quickly you can get a sort of sparkly design for your project. Now to create the domed circle, so this is my original circle size. This is the embossed piece. And I'm just looking for, okay, here I have it. So I have a foam pad, and I'm just going to press into the circle with a stylus. So I do have, it's not the biggest stylus, but it is a pretty big ball. We did just receive some of these different size styluses. There's 3 together in a package, and they each have 2 sizes to allow you to do some of this paper molding, and it's great for flowers. So I'm just checking out the comments here. And Carol's asking, were we supposed to put foam squares beneath the tea bag? No, we just did tape beneath the rosette, but we did foam tape or foam tabs behind the frame. So the frame would be raised a little bit. And then we can use some foam tabs inside this little dome. Now you can do 2 ways. You can add the foam tabs and add it to your design now, or you can add the sparkles, let it dry, and add it later. I think I'm going to do the sparkles now and add it later so that I don't get sparkles inside my rosette. So I'm going to use, this is called Iced Snow. It's by Cosmic Shimmer, but use any glitter that you might have. Oh, I actually took off the little protective layers. Maybe I'm going to change my mind here. Oh, you need to have thick enough foam tabs that when you push it down, it doesn't flatten the dome. So I'm going to add a few more here, and I'm going to leave them. So you can get different thicknesses in the foam tabs, or you can add 2 together. I'm just going to grab a scrap piece of paper. And I'm going to add some glue to my circle design here. And before I started, I made sure my glue was flowing well. And then it's very warm in my house right now. Let's see, I can open my glue. Oh, there it comes. Okay. So I'm just going to cover it in glue. And then you don't want to drop it. So, and then just sprinkle. I'm going to use my trusted tweezers here. This is when if you put it first on, it probably works a little bit better. But I'm just going to dip it into the sprinkles and then take it out again. Now, this shows white, but it's dries clear glue. So it will be clear, looking like the other design I showed you when we're finished. So I'm just going to let that dry. And then basically this card is completed. Doesn't look like it's completed, but we're good. We've made the little piece for the center. And then I had some purple pearls that I added into each of the corners. So you can see what you might have in your stash and add something to the corners if you like. And we'll finish off this design once we add the little dome to the center. So we'll look again at it as we move through the class. All right, so that was pretty simple to finish that design. And then the next one we need to finish is this Zed Fold card. So you needed to cut the background card. I believe it's 8 by 8. And we're going to score it at 4. So I'm not sure if you have it cut already. I have mine cut, and I'm going to score at 4. So that's the first score line. June's asking what's the paper measurements. So for the card, it's 8 by 8, and we score at 4. And then we're going to score again at 2 in a minute. And then from the previous paper, you should have had some left over, and it was about 7 3/4 long by 3 3/4 wide for the darkest color that you might have. And then 2 strips that are 1 3/4 by 7 3/4. And then this front white piece is, I wish I had my ruler. It should, well, no, for the inside, I left the size that was left over from cutting the 8 by 8 square. I left that piece and put that on this inside. This one is, I can just measure it. This one is it looks about 3 1/4 to me by 7 1/4. So hopefully that helps. And now going back to this card, because it is a Zed fold, you can see that we fold the front layer of the card there. It's basically just in half. So we know that we scored at 4. So we're going to just score at 2. I'm not using my big scoreboard here, but oops, I'm going to spread this. So that's our Zed fold. And you may want to take your bone folder and just burnish that fold. And now what we're going to do is add the colored paper pieces. So we actually are going to use one of the colors. It's totally up to you which colors you choose. I'm going to choose the darkest one for the back or the inside of the card. And then I'm going to choose 2 of the lighter pieces for each of these layers. So we're going to put a piece on this side, the front, and then on the inside of the card. Or if you fold it out, it's going to have 2 colors. Okay, now I'm going to just use some double-sided tape to add these to my card. And this time I'm using 3mm size tape because this is a lightweight paper and I don't need that much adhesive to attach it to my card. You could just put a bead of glue around the outside edge if you wanted. Sometimes if it's a thin enough strip, I don't even add, I just put it along the long edge. This one I'm not putting it in the center. It's really not necessary. All right, so adhere these strips to the card. So I'm choosing lightest that will be on the front and then the medium-sized color on the inside panel, and on the larger piece of the inside, I'm choosing the darkest. But again, there's no right or wrong. It's whatever you prefer. All right. So that's our Zed fold. And as you can see from the sample here, we're going to create a front panel that has some scored lines on it. So if you want to do the score lines, you can. If you want to emboss it with an embossing folder, you can. If you want to leave it plain, it doesn't matter. The original design from Jamie Rogers, from what I could follow from the instructions, was for this sort of square boxes on the front of the design. So I'm going to grab my front panel. It's slightly larger than my original design, but it doesn't really matter. For these Zed Fold cards, it doesn't matter what the measurements are, but what you kind of want to do is make sure that the inner panel is covered, because when you keep it closed, you don't want the inner panel on outside this panel. I mean, if it happens, it happens, but it's nicer that it's sort of a surprise. You think, oh, and then you open it because it's sort of hidden behind it. Now, in Jamie Rogers' instructions, he did stamp. I'm just going to still trim the length down a little bit. He did stamp the inside panel with one of the sentiments, and you're welcome to do that, or add a die cut sentiment, whatever you want. Sometimes it's always nice to leave the sentiment off, because then you can use it for any occasion whenever one comes up and you weren't really thinking about it. So you've got something already made, and it's quick to add a sentiment. So I'm going to pull in my larger scoreboard here. So this is the Hunky Dory scoreboard, and I did do a video of how to make boxes with this scoreboard, and we're going to use it more in upcoming classes. In fact, it's unfortunately just sold out on our website, but more are coming in. So according to this design, it has, so first of all, we're going to do vertical lines with our scoreboard, and then we're going to do the horizontal lines. I'm just going to do 1/2 inch, and I'm actually going to do it on this side because it's closer to me. So whatever distance you want between your lines, it doesn't matter. It just creates a little different effect. But I'm doing 1/2 inch. You can do 1/2 inch on one side and 1/4 inch on another. It really, really, really doesn't matter. Whoops, I keep missing that. If you go outside your score line, which I did, just going to slide this over. I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, there's 2 little lines just here. Take a stylus and on a flat surface, just rub over it. It will almost fix your little error. And especially when we're going to do score lines this way, you'll never see it. So now I'm going to turn my design horizontal, and I'm going to do, I wanted to make sure that my score lines are, so I needed to do it from the back so that it shows up on the front. So both show up on the front. Of course, the ones you do second will show up more. I don't know why, but it seems to always be that way. So again, I'm choosing just 1/2 inch increments to create a checkerboard. So this is another good use of your scoreboard, that you can create any line type designs on paper to make it appear embossed. And I'm just going to show you this. This is a design. This is one of the Lisa Horton vases that I colored using her stencils that come with it. And I added 3 little lines right here because I thought the vase was kind of plain. So just those 3 little straight lines just add some dimension and interest to the vase. So think about that for your projects. Okay. All right, I'm going to put my scoreboard away. And now what we're going to do is add our checkerboard design card on the front of the Zed Fold card. So I'm going to try and make the checkerboard panel card have the same amount of color on each side. That's how I'm going to look at it so that I can sort of center it. So if you want to go ahead and just add, you're going to just add tape to this left-hand side of the panel because this is going to not have tape. So if you wanted to add a little pencil mark, you could do that because we're actually going to add a strip of colored paper anyway. So you'll kind of know what the middle is, and you can just add tape behind that little pencil mark. You can actually just draw a little pencil mark so I know. So I was able to just do it on the back side. You can't really see it, but it's there. And I'm just going to add a couple pieces of tape here, and that's going to be plenty. And I just always peel back half of my tape so that I can get it lined up properly before I adhere it completely. All right, so we have our panel, our Zed Fold design. And now we're going to add a strip of colored paper. Now again, it doesn't matter which color you choose, whether we want the darkest color, the medium color, or the lightest color. You can tell this is where I cut my T-fold or tea-bag folding designs from. And I think that's going to be a strip that I can use. And again, you don't need, it looks like it's about 3 inches, but you can choose whatever length you want. And even if you wanted to add ribbon or something, you could do that as well for this design. Or if you're making a different color. And now I'm just going to add that. And I'm going to use the fold as my sort of guideline of where I want it to be. Just so happens that there's also an embossed line on my right-hand side. So that's going to keep it straight. And I'm just going to use a little bit of glue, just because double-sided tape isn't really going to work. I would have used sticky specs, but I don't have my sticky specs here. And this I can just slide up. It's kind of like a wreath, adding a wreath to the design. Now this is my rosette that I made, and this was from using the fold number 4 from the inside of the die package. And we can just add this again with double-sided tape to the front of this design or this panel. So I'm just going to, because remember we added everything to just a little square. So now we can add some double-sided tape to that square and then adhere it to the design. I'm adding a 3 just because this design, we don't want it to fall off. And whenever you're adding something to an embossed design, it's never as flat, and therefore a little more adhesive is always a good idea. Now I have my strip there. It allows me to put it up top if I want it, or I can make it a little bit lower. It's up to you, because you could always add a sentiment at the bottom or underneath this if you wanted. And then again, for this design, I had a big pearl. Now, the big pearls I used are from a Hunky Dory pearl pack that is on the website. But you could use a dome like we created earlier. to put on into the center, or another jewel, whatever you might have in your stash. Now to finish off this design, I did add a couple little colored pearls into the corners. So whatever you might have. If you have something, sometimes you might have jewels that match and you have them in different sizes. Otherwise, you might have sort of stones or pearls, and you can mix and match them. All right. You can add the panel to the inside to finish off, and maybe you want to stamp that with a sentiment. Or you could leave it like this and add another sentiment, whatever you like. But that's basically this card finished. All right, so now we're going to move on to the cards for this class. And let me find them again. Oh, I have them hiding here. So we do need to stamp, and we're going to stamp with all of the stamps, actually. Maybe what we'll do is cut our cardstock so that that's ready to go and we can just add it. So this red card is, the white card is a 5 by 5 square card. So cut a piece of paper 5 inches by 10 inches and then fold in half. This little Christmas tree card, this is a 5.5 inch square card. So you're going to cut a piece of paper that's 8.5 by 11. You're just going to cut it 5.5 inches by 11, and then we're going to fold in half. The red paper is 4 3/4 by 4 3/4, and we're going to need just one of those squares. And then on this card, the green paper is 5 1/4 by 5 1/4, and the top, or this second white square, is 5 1/4 by, 5 by 5. So 5 by 5. So hopefully everybody's kind of got that. It is in the instructions. So basically a 5 by 5 card, a 5.5 by 5.5 card, an extra 5 by 5 white square, 5 1/4 by 5 1/4 green square, and 4 3/4 by 4 3/4 red. You are going to need a small piece of red card that matches the card you're going to use. And all we're going to do is cut out the inner part of the stamp design. So it only needs to be a small piece. So I have this one cut that we're going to stamp as well. So I'm going to give you a few minutes so that you can cut your cards, and then we'll start our stamping. And then once you have your card cut, then you can score it and basically score it in half. So this is my 5 by 5 card. And then this is my 5.5 by 5.5 card. And then for the Christmas trees, we're just going to use copy paper to stamp onto and then die cut. So hopefully you have a piece of copy paper. We just are going to do one of the large and one of the small, because all we have to do is cut the designs in half to fold them into the trees. So you only need like a half a piece of copy paper to stamp those. And hopefully people have a stamping tool. Now the stamping tool does make the stamping much easier. Now on the design today, I used the Cosmic Shimmer Detailed Bright Gold embossing powder. So it doesn't matter if you don't have the bright gold, but you have silver or you have something else that would work, then you can use that. I just use the gold because it lends itself to Christmas. But I think I said in the other ideas with the instructions that you could make this out of blue and silver, or a different color combination, green and gold, because I thought the stamp looked like a poinsettia. I made it red, but we know that there's white poinsettias and pink poinsettias, so you can make it whatever color. Let's get my stamps. I have my stamps. So for this gold card, we're going to use the stamp that looks like, to me, a poinsettia. So it's this one up here. So top right part of the stamp design set. And what I want to do is put my piece of red card into my stamp positioner, and we're going to just stamp the inner part of the card first, and then we'll do the corners. Okay, so I think that was the easier way. It's too hard to stamp it all because chances are you're going to rub off some of the Versamark ink or the embossing powder, etc. I thought this worked the best. Now, again, positioning the stamp, I positioned it so that the point was going to be up as opposed to flat. So again, just position it in the center, or as close to the center as you can see. If you wanted, you could always draw lines in, and then you could try and align the stamp in the center. I'm just going to eyeball it. I have some grid lines on my stamp positioner, so I can just see if I've got it sort of. I think it just needs to shift the shade here. All right, so now we're going to use Versamark ink. Actually, I think this needs to be shifted. I'm going to shift it up a shade. But before we do that, we want to use a anti-static bag. So this is a little bag. Comes like this. It's filled with some sort of powder that decreases the static charge of your paper. So your embossing powder won't stick to the paper and then cause little smudges. So very generously rub over your paper so that, and Carol's just saying, measurement on the red square is 4 3/4 by 4 3/4. So generously rub over the red all over so that your embossing powder won't adhere to it. And this, we do carry these on the Ecstasy Crafts website under Nellie's, I think they're called anti-static tool or bag. And then I was watching Jennifer McGuire, and she watched somebody else who used one of these little alligator type clips. It just makes it easier to rub across your paper to hold the little anti-static bag. Now, what I want to do is just ink up, well, with Versamark ink, my stamp. So again, the Versamark is like a clear watermark type ink pad, but it stays sticky to allow the embossing powder to adhere to it. And we do carry those at Ecstasy Crafts. And we also have the little re-inkers. So I just re-inked mine before I started today. Now I'm just going to press down. And with the Versamark, you can actually see if you missed a little area or not, because it does create that watermark. And I missed a tiny little bit here. It's not going to really make a difference because I am going to add stuff on top. Add a layer. Okay. So you can see I have my watermark stamp there. And this will stay sticky for a while. So you don't feel rushed that you have to get the embossing powder onto it right away. Now I'm going to take a scrap paper that's going to collect my embossing powder. And I'm just going to spread some. I usually like to spread it at the top and then let it just fall down over the design. You can see I've got some embossing powder that's adhered. Now I just take my finger and sort of ping it against the paper to try and get any excess embossing powder off. So you want to take any excess powder off before you heat it. If you heat it, it's going to be on your paper. Sometimes, if it's really close to your designs, you can take like a paintbrush I think there's just a little bit extra there. I think that's pretty good. Now we're going to heat emboss. But before I do that, I'm going to just move my excess embossing powder into the center of my scrap paper, put it back into my little pot or jar, and now I can heat it. So I might just mute my mic a second while I heat so that you don't have to hear my heat tool. But we're going to heat it, and you can see how the embossing powder turns from this brown color to a gold color. So I'm just going to mute my mic for a second. Okay, so I'm back. So you'll notice that I heated from the back, and I find that's the best, especially if I'm using any metallic embossing powder. The heat, my heat gun has air blowing, and that will spread the powder if it's not well adhered to the Versamark ink. So that's why I always do it from the back. If it's clear embossing powder, sometimes I'll do it from the front, or I will do it from the back for a little while, and then until it's sort of started to heat and melt, and then go to the front so that nothing moves around. So Nancy says, yeah, it looks, never gets old, looks like magic. And then Carol asked, how do we get the chalky powder off after we emboss? Help me. So you mean after you heat emboss, Carol? Is it that you've got powder around the edge? It's hard to get that off. Sometimes a piece of very fine sandpaper might work. There is a tool from Couture Creations that's like an electric eraser, and you can sometimes get little bits off. But the sooner you do it, the better. And the easiest way is to use the anti-static bag. Oh, you said yes from the anti-static bag. No problem, just wipe that off. But only after you've heat embossed it, because it will just wipe off. Yeah, so June said she's talking about the powder bag. Yeah, it'll just wipe off. You can just wipe it off. All right, so now we have this medallion stamped in the center. And now what we want to do is stamp the corners. I thought it'd be nice to use the stamp in the corner. So now what we want to do, I'm going to just move this scrap piece of paper over. Okay. So this is where a stamp positioner tool comes in very handy, because we're going to do all the corners together. So I'm going to rub again generously with my anti-static bag. So all my corners are done. And I'm going to move this over just a shade. Now I have a sticky mat that I think I explained the last time on the back of my stamp positioner. So now what I do is take my stamp. Now I really should wipe it off because there will be still some, I had mine, oh, here we go. There will be some Versamark left on it. You don't get it all on the stamp. So I'm going to take my stamp chamois, and if you have just a baby wipe or something, whatever you might use to clean off your stamps, just take it and wipe it over. And then I'm going to just dry it a bit. Oh, it's going to stick to it. Because I'm going to position it. And this stamp, I'm wondering which one I'm going to do. You know what? I'm going to do the outside corner, I think. That way it can stay pretty much on my stamp positioner. And you can see as you're trying to line it up that the design fits nicely in the corner. Just aim to have this one little edge lined up and the other edge lined up, and then you'll get a nice corner design. So now I'm going to pick up my stamp and I'm going to stamp down in the upper right hand corner each time. So I only need to add a little bit of Versamark to this one little corner area. Oh, actually, we should have stamped, but we can still do that. We'll do that after. Now, what we're going to do is turn the design so that we can do all of the corners before we add the embossing powder. Mine didn't really line up very well. Certainly these stamp positioners have made quite a difference to everyone's stamping, because you used to have to hope you got enough ink and it positioned correctly and that your hands didn't shake when you stamped on your paper. And there's so many things you can do with the stamp with the stamp positioners as well. Restamping different colors of ink. I actually had my paper very square or something. But at least I can kind of see through it. I reapply the anti-static tool in the corners because invariably I will have rubbed some off. All right. So now once you have the four corners done again, then we're going to add the embossing powder to each of the corners, and then we're going to heat emboss. Flinging extra embossing powder on. looks pretty good. Now before I heat emboss this, I'm just going to set it aside because I want to just stamp the inner part of the poinsettia, because then we can heat emboss everything together. So I have just a little square. You can do a full square if you want and use the excess, but all I really want is the inner poinsettia. We're going to cut that out. I'm just going to turn it over. So I still had a little bit of Versamark ink. I'm going to turn it over and put my little magnets down so that it stays down. And then we can just add some Versamark to the center. Doesn't look too full to me, so I'm just going to do it again because I can. And now we're just going to add the gold embossing powder to this design. And if it didn't get over all of the Versamark, as long as the center is done, it's fine. Okay, so now I'm going to heat emboss everything. So I'm going to just mute my mic so you don't have to hear my heat tool. And I'll show you as things happen again. So again, I'm going to start from the back and just let it heat emboss. So I'll be back in a minute or two. Okay, I'm back again. And so now we have our medallion in the center and each of the corners heat embossed. And we have an extra little piece that we're going to cut out the center. So why don't we cut out this first? So just use scissors. And it's pretty simple fussy cutting because we're just going to go along the straight edges of the inside. So all we have to do is cut some straight edges. So if you want to go ahead and do that, I'm going to get a little pointier scissors here. Sometimes I find it's easier just to go from the center in. There's a little bit of a leaf coming up into the center edges. So in Southern Ontario here, I checked what the temperature was 30 something Celsius and felt like 44. So it's really a warm spell. I guess summer just started yesterday, and it certainly feels like it. I was camping just south of Parry Sound on the weekend. And one morning when we got up, it was 8 degrees and felt like 4. So 8 is about 46 Fahrenheit and 4 is about 40. It was chilly. It's nice and warm. It was nice and sunny, so that was good. And it did warm up during the day. All right. Well, actually, I didn't use this. I used the smaller one. I cut out the bigger one, but we actually only need the inside one. It's up to you whether you want the bigger one or the smaller one. It doesn't really matter, because it doesn't take long to just trim out the extra little leaves. It's actually simpler cutting for everyone. Now I'm going on the outside edge of the embossing so that it's a continuous outside edge. So I'm going to throw these away, but you can always keep little bits of them for other designs. It will make it more dimensional. I think what we're going to do, just so that we can get we'll just stamp the other designs. So for the trees on this card, here, we're going to use the large stamp, and we're going to use the other smaller stamp that has a different design than the poinsettia-like design on the inside. And again, we just need about half a piece of copy paper, and we can stamp both of the designs together. I just took the stamps off my protective sheet here. And I'm going to grab my copy paper. And this we're going to stamp in green ink. So you can see I can fit both together and stamp them together. So I'm going to pick up the stamps, and then the ink I'm using today is a VersaFine Clair in Shady Lane. But whatever green you have, This is one of the, I have a couple greens, but I like this color. So I'm just going to ink up my stamps, press down. I'm jiggling the table, so I missed a tiny little bit there. Probably doesn't matter. We're only going to use half for each tree, so that makes it work well. I think that looks pretty good. So if you're planning to use this design for your Christmas cards, or some of your Christmas, then you can stamp a whole bunch together. And in the last video, we cut them all out together. So you can check that out if you weren't able to see that one yet. So you can cut, I think we cut like 8 at one go. But if you cut it in squares first, and then always stamp in the same position, then you can do that. You can line them up and cut them all together. I just wanted to be able to cut all of our designs together. Okay, so I'm just going to set this aside. It usually on copy paper, it doesn't take long to dry. You can always heat set it with your heat gun. I'm going to let it just set naturally, and we're going to cut from the red card. Okay, so just put that aside. So the thing about these medallions and the dies, what I really like about them is that so it allows you to line it up, but it also gives you a lovely frame. That's my extra one. So where are my dies now? Oh, there. So now I'm going to take my cutting plates and I'm going to cut the squirrel, the medallion out of the center of this design. So you can see, well, maybe you can't, but I can line the die up so that the outer gold frame, you can see around it. Now I would normally use a little bit of tape to hold this die in place, but it doesn't look like I brought any. Oh, here I'm gonna grab some. So this is, I use some of the same tape just to hold my two dies together to create the frame for the card from the last class. And this is just painter's tape, but you just want to use a low tack tape. Just a little bit, because sometimes it may still rip your paper if your paper is very thin. So I'm going to run this through. And that would be a very pretty frame for another design. You could fill this little window with something else other than the medallion. We're going to attach this to our card with some foam tape behind or foam strips so that it's raised. And then we're going to put the medallion in the center so that it's sort of debossed, or not really debossed, but it's recessed. So put this aside. And now if you want to cut your other medallions with the die set, then we'll have our designs cut. All right. So if you want to put these aside, then I think we can finish the red card first, and then we'll do the little tree card. So you need to take your 5x5 card, and then we're going to adhere the red frame we made using either foam tape or foam strips. So, or you could use foam tabs if you wanted. Add that to the back as well. Or you can make it flat, but the idea of cutting it out and making the little frame is so that we could make this a little more dimensional. Now we do have foam strips on the website from Hunky Dory and some different foam tapes. Just makes it faster. Or you could add several layers of cardstock as well if you have scrap cardstock. And I'm just going to peel back some of the foam tape so that I can center it. So you can see how you could even stamp it in gold on the white would be nice too. And then it would just look somewhat different. And now all we're going to do is add some tape to the back of our medallion. I'm just going to use some of my 5mm. You could use glue. Sometimes it's nice to leave the little tabs up so you can maneuver the design a little bit while you're putting it in the center so that it gets in the correct position. And now we're going to add our little poinsettia. We're going to add it to the center. But in my example, I wanted it raised a little bit. So you can see that it's raised. And so in order to get it raised without needing several designs, what I did was I cut it down the center. Like that. And then just fold back on around each petal. And there, just as if you're going into the center along the gold line. And just fold it back again. Actually, I'm going to do it opposite. Yeah, this one I'm going to do up. And we're going to do exactly the same to the other side. So you can see how one is raised and the one is flat. So it just adds some dimension. So I'm going to go down and then up and then down. Open it up. My camera froze here. Okay. Sorry for that little. Okay. So now we're going to just add a few foam tubs behind the petals and add it back directly on top. And you should be able to line it up so it's very hard to even know that it was cut. So I'm going to do the same thing to this side. I'm just putting it on the outside, or the foam tubs behind the outside petals. And there we have the dimensional design. Now what I did was I took some gold jewels and I added a larger one into the center of the poinsettia and into each corner. You can see here. And then what I did was I added, these are just gold sticker lines to create the frame. So if you purchase the kit for the dogwood panel card, then you would have, sorry about that. You should have some sticker lines. Otherwise, you might have some, anyway, this one's a little too short. These are remnants I have. I think there's one more here. Okay. So I just sort of picked a part on the design just above the little indentation, and then you can just cut it. Just different scissors here. And you can just try and do that around each side if you wanted. I kind of thought it was a good way to create a frame. And my embossing powder matches the sticker lines really well. except I'm not sure I have any more straight lines here. If you have swirly lines, you can do that as well. I'll just show you, but I can always take that off, this off, when I find more straight lines. I thought those little remnant pieces were going to be long enough. So whatever type of sticker line that you have, you can see the different frames you can create. So I'll show you a little closer up. So you can see the little wavy line. And that's basically the card is completed, except for the jewels that you would add to the frame and the center of the poinsettia. Now I did add a sentiment, Merry Christmas. This is from the Heffy Doodle. I think it say it with sentiments. But you can leave that off, or you can actually stamp on a small piece of red, or you can die cut gold or something else, whatever you wanted. But that's basically this card completed. So now we want to move on. How to get the dimension on the center of the poinsettia. Oh, somebody's asking, Carol, could you please review how to get the dimension on the center? So we cut it in half, and then we folded the petals back on itself, and then we opened it up again, and then we added foam tabs to each end of the half, I guess. So here, 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 and here. And then I just added it on directly on top of the medallion. That's how, hopefully that helps. And because we folded it, you're gonna get that sort of offset dimension, right? It's not even, it's not flat. It's what gives you the idea of petals. Okay, so the next card is, we're going to make these little trees. So this card design, I actually used an embossing folder. I wrote it in the instructions. It's the Nellie's Choice. It's a snowy scene. But you can use any embossing folder you might have. This one has a nice moon. It is three-dimensional. It's harder to see because I added the ice snow to make it glittery. I cut the snowbanks using a die set from Frantic Stamper, which was stitched edgers. I have it here. I'm just going to try and find it. Oh, here it is. Now, I just spoke with Dennis because it's not available on the website, but it is still available from Frantic Stamper. So he was going to order some. But if you have, you can just draw it freehand, or you can use any other edger dies. This one has several different sort of swirly bits, and they're stitched on both sides. So when you cut, you get stitching on the cut, on both cut sides. I think you can see it there. So I just used it to cut this snowbank into my card. And I use these the most for snowbanks and winter scene cards. Anyway, so that's coming back. It's the stitched scene builder edgers. So you can use it for grass or for hills or whatever. 09403. I can't have a link to it because it's not currently on our website. It's a die I've had, but if you have another edger die then you can use that. I know Sue Wilson had some as well, but again, I couldn't find them on our website. So I think these will work well, and he will order some. So I think what I want to do is to make the trees, because if we run out of time, then the background is fairly straightforward. But I want to show you how to do the trees. So we stamped it in green, and I have a green background here. But you could stamp them in gold. You could stamp it whatever color you wanted. And then what we're going to do is we're going to color part of the designs with red, or at least that's what I did. If you want, you can color it a different color, green, or whatever color you prefer. Now, this isn't a fancy marker. It does have two tips, a wide and a narrow tip. It's not alcohol-based, it's just a regular marker. And what I'm going to do is color around the outside edge in here. And I'm going to color the circles. It's kind of the same areas we colored in the last class when we used the paintbrush and the pixie sparkles. The marker makes it a little faster. And then these little long areas, both on the outside and the inside. So coloring is pretty fast with markers. But it really does add something to the folded designs. Now my folds are pretty simple compared to they were pretty simple last time, but they just took a while to get sorted. Okay, so I have the large design done, and we're going to cut that in half. And then this is the smaller design. And I think I'm going to, again, color around the outside edge. And then I colored just this sort of area on the inside. You could do more if you wanted. You could experiment. And then what I also did was I added, once I had the trees on the card, you could do it now as well, but we'll leave it for later if you have some glitter glue. I had some red glitter glue, and it just added a little more sparkle to the trees. Sometimes I find it easier to add the sparkle once the card's put together, because then you can just set it aside and let it dry. You're less likely to mess it up. I didn't color anything in the center of this one because when you fold it, it really doesn't matter. You could do a little bit of the edge. Okay. So this was the smaller design. Now what we're going to do is cut both in half. Half as the same kind of way we folded. So in between the pointy petals. The same thing for this, in between the pointy petals, and just follow the line to cut in half. We're only going to use 1/2 for this card design, so you'll have enough to make another one. And we're going to use both of the smaller designs. I'll probably keep this so I can fold it with you as a second review of the folding pattern. So now what I'm going to do is we're going to fold each petal at the point. And we're just going to do like an accordion fold. So this one, I'm folding in half. Then I'm going to fold there, and I'm going to fold this back. And then we're going to fold this up again, and then this is going to go up and fold back again. So it's just like an accordion fold, or mountain and valley fold, however you want to call it. Okay, so hopefully people have that, like the dies. Yes. And then what we're going to do is fold the two backs, and we're going to tape it. We're just going to tape a little piece of double-sided tape. I would prefer to use a little thicker, but this is going to be fine. So that the backs are together. And then we have the front. So the back is together, like a little triangle. And the front will fold flat for mailing, but we want it sort of raised to make it a dimensional tree. And that's how we're going to put it on our card. Okay, and I'll show you how to finish that off, because I didn't make myself little trunks. So we're going to just do that again. So we're just going to basically fold all the pointy petals in half. I was talking to Dennis today, and he said Jamie Rogers is coming out with more Christmas designs with the tea bag folding. So I'll wait to see what that looks like. So again, we've got our little folds. We're going to just fold the two edges to the back, and we're going to put a piece of tape on that to hold it together, and also to adhere it to our card. And we're going to add the trunks. And we're going to do the big design the same way, exactly the same way. So we're going to fold all our pointy petals in half. I'm doing it in my hands, but you could actually burnish the folds together, or like to make them more burnished, I guess, or crisp. So again, even with the large one, we're going to push these little two edges together, And we're going to add some double-sided tape. Oh, here's my bigger one. Just going to use a little piece of it. I think this is 9 millimeters. Make as nice a fold in the center. Oh, I've taped it. So now what we need is some thin strips of green paper. I think it's kind of like 1/8 of an inch. And you can cut them. It's easier to cut them longer and trim them once you have your design ready. And what we're going to do with this is it's going to go on the inside. So we're going to open this up a little bit, and you're going to put glue on both sides of the green paper, and we're going to put it right in the middle and then press it down. This really isn't a great fold here. Now I don't have glue on it yet, but then it's going to help it stay flat when you put it in an envelope. And because otherwise it's going to, like, you don't want, it'll just make it easier to lie flat. So I'm going to put glue on both sides. And just place it on the inside of my tree. And it doesn't have to go all the way up, just so that it adheres a little bit. And we can always trim this. Also gets you to see whether you like shorter tree trunks or taller tree trunks. It doesn't really matter. But we're going to do that for both of the smaller ones as well. So then, once you're done, you've got the little dimensional tree, because you can just fold it up, and then you'll have that type of design. So you can put these aside. And now I'm just going to grab, so this is my 5.5 by 5.5 card. And then I have my 5.25 by 5.25 green square that I'm going to put on top of that. And then this is the 5-inch square. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to die cut using one of my stitch edgers. I'm just going to use this one. And really it doesn't matter where you place it, but I'm going to die cut this. Now you could just freehand a snowbank, Or if you have a die set similar, you could use it using that. Or you could just finish it off once you figure out what you might want to use. So now you can see I have two edges that have a little stitched effect. And the way I made this card was I allowed a little bit of the green to show in between the two. Just adds some color to the card. And now this top part, I'm going to emboss with the 3D embossing folder from Nellie. And so this is the one. It is a slimline embossing folder, but I'm only going to use part of it. And the part I like of this folder includes the moon, really. And so I'm just going to place it where I wanted. And this design has snow in the sky. So it's hard to see because I added, well, you can see little embossed dots there. And I added some of the sparkle. So I'm just going to run this through my machine. Because it is a 3D embossing folder, it is quite thick. So you just have to, I'm sorry about that. My top plate just fell on the floor. So you're going to have to use whatever sandwich you need to do the embossing. Carol said, is she the only one still colored? Well, you're probably doing a much better job than I did. There we go. Or you have a smaller tip marker. So there's my embossed design. You can see the trees and the snow and the moon. And so now we can just adhere these pieces to the background card. And what I did was I used double-sided tape for the top part, the embossed part. And then I actually used some foam tape behind the snowbank, just again to raise it a little bit, give a little dimension. It does add to it, I think. It's not a crucial difference, but. So I'm just going to add some tape to these pieces, and then we'll just add the trees. Now you could just make the trees from green paper. You could emboss in gold, no coloring involved if you prefer. I tried to do it so that you could recognize that it was from the tea bag folding, but there's lots of ways you can change these. And I thought it was just kind of fun using the tea bag folding stamps to make these trees. They kind of remind me of that folk art painting. And it's always fun to be able to use your everyday items for Christmas as well. Because I don't know about you, but I definitely make more Christmas cards than any other type of card. So if I'm going to leave a little bit, I want to make sure I know how much to leave when I add this to my card. So manufacturers are starting to ship their Christmas product. So in the next couple months, we're going to be having lots of new Christmas items in the warehouse. I don't know if that's good or not. I like to think that summer's going to last a little longer. So I just added this with the foam tape. And now we can add our trees. Now what I did was I added some foam tape behind the trees to raise them. Foam tabs or foam tape. And you can line them up however you think you want them to be. And then you can trim the trunks however you want them as well. I think that looks pretty good. So. Now you can either peel back the double-sided tape and then add your foam tabs. And I just added a little bit of glue to the trunk. Or you could run some sticky specks behind them if that was easier. But now for this design too, you could stamp something in the snowbank if you wanted, or you could add a die cut sentiment. Even put something on the, leave it and put something on the inside. So there we have our trees. And now to finish off this card, I'm going to just add some of the iced snow. And I'll just show you how I do that, because that's something that you can use a lot for Christmas cards. So I'm just going to take my glue and I'm going to run a bead in between the trees and along the stitch line, which makes that very simple. And then I'm just going to add a little bit over the trees. And then I'm just going to dot it. To simulate the snow. And then I'm just going to take my ice snow or glitter, whatever you're using, and just sprinkle it over, tap it off, and then we're just going to let it dry. But you can see now you've got the sparkle along the snowbank, in the sky, and along the trees. Now you could add a little bit of glitter glue to your trees. I'll show you how I did that with my other designs. I don't know if you can see it. I just did it over the red areas, just a little more sparkle. And we do have, this is Twinkles, Cosmic Shimmer Twinkles. It's just like glitter glue. So if you have glitter glue, and just, it has a nice little applicator tip. And I'm just going to rub it on those little areas. And then this is where I said it's always easier if you can just let it dry and not manipulate the card. Now you could add it along the bottom edge as well if you wanted, but it's just a little more sparkle on the trees. You could add something to the trunks if you wanted to. I do have some green, but I didn't have it here right now. Okay, there's this little piece of paper here. Now to finish off this card, I did add a little few red jewels to the corner to just brighten up the card. So those are our cards that we were going to make today. I'm just reaching to find my little medallion, my sparkly medallion for the inside of this card. I'm just going to take off the protective layers of my foam tabs and press it down. Now I could have made this purple. I could have made it any color. But you can see how just by adding that little bit of ice snow to a circular design, you can create your own perfect center. All right, so hopefully everybody enjoyed that. And you've got a couple Christmas cards ready for your Christmas card, gift card giving. So in the next class, I think we're still going to aim for Thursdays. I am not sure of my schedule coming up, but I think we're going to aim for July 7th. The timing, we should let you know by the end of the week whether it's going to be June 7th and what time, or if it's going to be another day of the week. And my thought was we would make gift bags. So there isn't really a kit for this. However, we're going to use 12 by 12 scrapbooking paper, and we're going to make some gift bags. Ideally, you would have a scoreboard. So if you don't have a scoreboard, and a larger scoreboard is helpful, but unfortunately our Hunky Dory scoreboards that I used earlier, this one, which is lovely for a 12 by 12 paper, it's sold out right now. So if you don't have a scoreboard, but you have one of these trimmers, then we can score in the track. You will need a stylus. And then the plan is to make gift bags, so of a variety of sizes, again, so that you're ready for your wrapping needs, whether for birthday events, Christmas, etc. So that was a thought for the next class. I haven't made the gift bags yet. I've made a couple gift bags with other paper for other designs, but not for this particular class. So I'm hoping to use maybe some 8 by 8 paper, maybe, and definitely 12 by 12 for the larger gift bags. So I'm going to make a video sort of so you can see ahead what we're going to make. And hopefully I'll get that done, I don't know, maybe tomorrow, maybe over the weekend. And then you'll have an idea of what we're going to make and what supplies you might need. But right now there's no class kit. You should be able to use some of the things that you have already at home. And then we'll make some gift bags to explore that. So hopefully people will enjoy that. And I think that's about it. So are there anybody else have any other questions? I'm just going to bring myself back into the screen. Any other questions before we go? And as I said, we're going to aim for July 7th. And I will make a little video showing off the gift bags that we're going to make. Of course, they're going to use the papers that I have available. But then it would give you an opportunity to purchase some papers if you wanted, or just watch. And then you can always get things that we used after. Okay? So have a great few weeks, everyone. Stay cool, because I think it's hot for a while now. And I'll see you on July 7th. And if the date is changed, then we will definitely let you know as soon as possible. So have a great afternoon, and thanks for joining us.